I want to take a moment to introduce our next group of panelists. That is Sandra Feijoo, Tiia Piller, and Michaela Schoberova. So before we get started into our questions, I want to welcome you all and take a moment for you just to share with us what your position at Colgate is and how long you've been with them. So Sandra, would you like to start for us?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and nice to be here. Well, I have been with Colgate for 14 years. Currently, I'm a learning partner for leadership and development, and I have been in this role for 2 years.
Thank you so much. Tiia.
Hi, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Thank you. My name is Tiia Piller. I'm currently in the role of Demand Director for North America. That means that I lead customer service and logistics for Colgate for North America. I've been with Colgate for 21 years, but I've just been in this job for 5 months. So definitely I'm really familiar with that first 90 days concept that we were just talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. And Michaela.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Chelsea. I'm Michaela Schoberova. My role is Worldwide Director of Leadership, People and Organizational Development. And I've been with Colgate for 19 years and happy to be here. Sandra and I actually work together, so we're excited together with Tiia to learn with you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. As you in the audience just heard, we have some Colgate lifers here, so they are definitely going to be able to give us some wonderful nuggets of knowledge as we go through this. So the first thing that I wanted to chat just briefly about is what we kind of just went over it, but how you landed your job at Colgate and how you've navigated kind of the corporate ladder, so to speak. So, if you can just give us a little bit about what your experience in entering Colgate has been and moving up within that. So, Sandra?
Sure. I think I realized about the open position when I get into Colgate, like 14 years ago. I was working in Colombia, and was through a network of HR people that I realized of the opportunity, and then I decided to apply, and here I am 14 years later on. So I think one of the aspects that I would say that has been helpful since I joined was to be open to different kind of projects. So I remember that I joined the company doing an specialist role in development, and really like a few months later, I had the opportunity to work in other projects in compensation. That was not an area of expertise for me, but this helped me to broaden my experience in HR function, and that has been really, really helpful. And I think connected with that, other aspect that was really helpful for me was from the beginning, try to start to create my local network, trying to understand how the organization was structured and which one were my key stakeholders. This sounds a little bit complicated at the beginning, but if you have like your manager support, you can like start like creating this network from the beginning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Tiia, do you want to share with us, again, kind of about your experience getting started, and maybe even if you saw some particular advantage entering the corporate world as opposed to, joining a startup or, nonprofit, even for that matter, something
Sure.
to that extent.
Okay, sure. So actually, little known secret that maybe Sandra and Michaela don't know is actually that my first time that I applied to Colgate, I was actually rejected. So I was a co-op student. I went to Stevens Institute of Technology, and my first co-op job. I'm so excited to get the job, and I applied for Colgate, and they rejected me. So I kept at it. I worked 3 more co-op jobs. I got some more experience, and then finally went back to Colgate for my last assignment and got the job. And I think, what's really key there is about not giving up, right? So it's similar to what Joanna talked about, is really if you have that vision and something that you really want, don't let someone say no, you try to find another way and keep fighting for it. I think, and that's been one of the things that has been an advantage, I think, in the Colgate world, is that you have that vision and what you want to do and you're in a big company, there are a lot of opportunities there for you at that company. So many of my friends that I graduated college with, they've worked for so many companies and done so many different jobs. But I've been able to have that same opportunity at Colgate, but always with the same company. So in now my 21 years, I've had 12 different positions within Colgate because there are so many opportunities for you in a large company. And I think that's one of the advantages, especially when you find that company where you feel like you fit in, where you like the culture. I mean, that's the most important thing, I think, when you're looking at a company. What's the culture like? What are the values like? Will I be a good fit here? And will I really enjoy going to work every day? You spend so many hours of your life at work that it's really important to have that passion and that strong connection with the company and the people in the company and how they're going to treat you. So I think that's really important to think about. It's not just you interviewing for a job, but you also need to do the research and to some degree interview that company as well to make sure that you're really going to be happy there.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Michaela, do you have anything to add just kind of about, just how you began your career with Colgate and any advice you have for students kind of interested in moving into the corporate field?
Yes, so I've never imagined that I would be working at Colgate and be in HR leadership. When I'm Slovakian, you can hear my accent. And when I first came to the US, I wanted to study, be a professor and a PhD in this area of HR and people and organizations, right? And then I noticed that a lot of my friends at grad school, they were going to companies for summer internships. And I said, wow, this is interesting. I don't want to be here alone in the summer. So off I went and applied with Colgate. And then I realized that, I much more like to do hands-on work rather than, studying the organization, right? So I completely switched and quickly graduated with a master's degree and went back to Colgate. And I would echo what Tiia said, pay attention to how you feel in the place and whether that's a good fit for you. And then, a lot of people have ideas like where I'm going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And I actually never had that. But every time I felt like, okay, in this role, I already learned enough, I'd start looking around and see what could be the possible next path. And does this feel right for me? And let me try this out, right? And through that, I had lots of different jobs at Colgate in various different areas. So you don't have to always know exactly what you want to be 10 years from now, but pay attention and try things out. Don't wait, go for it so that you build a variety of experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think it's always helpful to hear how someone who's, in a position that maybe you see yourself in a long term, how they got there. And, again, those bits of advice you give are invaluable. So thank you all for sharing. I want to talk a little bit about best practices when you're actually at the beginning of your kind of starting your job, starting your career. So looking at, how do you what are some best practices for getting noticed through the application process itself? And, it's hard to stand out in a crowd of people who in a lot of ways have similar backgrounds on their resume, GPAs, all of these kinds of things that we look at to take in. So, any advice you have again on how to stand out and even, from there on how to appropriately follow up, because I think that's a interesting part that changes depending maybe even on where you are applying, but something that I think is important to understand in that process. So Sandra, do you have any advice you'd like to share on that?
I would say first that in the full process, one thing that I really appreciate is when you identify that a person is really authentic. And you can see that from the application letter, at the interview, even with a thank you note, right? So I think it's important to be yourself. Sometimes we would like to look too perfect or too scripted. And I think that you notice that too. And I think, from my perspective, I prefer more authentic people. And I think it's good to share obviously things that you have done great, but also it's good to share this vulnerable side or things that maybe where you have failed and whatever you have learned from there and how you manage this part. So I think going back to your question, I think you can demonstrate that through your application into the process when you are like writing your interview, when you are sharing example things that you have done and your main learnings. And again, in the thank you note, I know that here in the US, it's very common to receive these kind of things. And sometimes when I see people highlight like 1, 2 things that they learned through the interview about the company or about myself, or I think these resonate, and I think these resonate with people that are part of the process.
So kind of finding those personal connections that will, recall someone's memory. I think that makes a lot of sense rather than a blank, like, thank you for having me. So that's a great
Exactly.
Piece of advice. Michaela, do you have any insight, kind of best practices there?
Sure. My group actually manages the undergrad and grad HR internship program. So I get to meet a lot of starters in their career. And what I'm looking for, what stands out to me is really at this point, you don't have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, but I'm looking for the curiosity, the hunger to learn, the ability to show that you're really interested and learn not only the academic way, right, but in the world around you, observing the world, you are connecting with people, you ask good questions. So I always pay very much attention to what question the future interns ask us, which shows me, how curious they are, also how prepared they are, as Joanna was speaking about the preparation, right? So I pay a lot of questions to attention to, are you demonstrating ability to learn, right? So that's important.
Absolutely. And just curious, since you are so involved in that part of the, application process, what do you see as the appropriate follow-up when you are, maybe you've turned in an application, you've done the interview process, and there's some kind of, traditional wait period as there are. What, I don't know, from your experience, would have been some follow-ups that maybe have resonated with you, or how you would advise, perspective to.
So, what impresses me about the thank you notes that I get, when I get a thank you note, it seems to me that people are more interested, they're demonstrating their passion, that they really want this opportunity, right? And they say something, as Sandra said, something unique about the interaction that we had in the interview and how that impacted them. And also, why their motivation has increased now that we have met, right? So it's like that match between, as Tiia was saying, between us and you, right? And so sharing something about why you feel this is a good match, in the thank you note, makes me feel like, okay, this young person is really interested in working with us.
Thank you for sharing. Tiia, do you have, I know you're not so much on the HR side of things, but do you have any, even in your own experience, any advice on really trying to stand out in a sea of applications, again, that, maybe do have similarities in background and things like that, specifically when you're, applying to maybe a specialized job? You're going to have a lot of applicants who have the same BA or BS, whatever that might look like. So any tips that you seem to work for you when you were going through application processes and things?
Yeah, I think, I love the feedback earlier about, being yourself and being authentic, right? And so that can shine through also in your resume or your application, right? Think about what it is that makes you unique. Maybe you don't have a lot of experience, but maybe you had a leadership role in some activity that you're participating in your university, and you can highlight that, right? Maybe you didn't have a leadership role, but you were able to deliver some kind of unique result, right? You were able to fundraise a record amount of money in a charity you're involved in or something like that, right? Or maybe you have a really interesting hobby that you're super passionate about. reflect that on your resume, because those will be things that people will remember about you, and that will be called out when you're going through all of these resumes and so many look the same, and one of those little things could be something that catches that recruiter's eye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. I think that's something that's really hard to kind of wrap your brain around when you are starting in that process, outside of just, filling out the basics of an application. And so I appreciate all those, again, little nuggets of wisdom you guys are giving our audience. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID itself has had on this process for people. I know that's something that we're not quite where we were a year ago today, but we are still feeling the impacts for sure that of, just some of the differences and adaptations that COVID has engendered. And so, Michaela, do you want to share with us, I guess, any advice you have for students on navigating the job application process in wake of COVID? Does that, what are the major changes, I suppose, that you've seen coming from definitely the HR side of that?
So, what really has changed, right? That our entire process has moved virtual, right? So now, instead of having the full picture, you only have this little rectangle here, right? So, all of the interaction happened virtually, but it's still, as close as it could be. And the world was already going in that direction anyway. So I would say, you have to maximize your presence in this little rectangle, right? And, just be very focused as you would be in an interview anyway. What is more difficult is that you cannot read all of the surrounding information, right? So for example, when you're trying to figure out, like, is this a good place for me? You would have known more if you have visited, right? If you have seen the atmosphere in the office, etc. So I think that it requires, again, the need to prepare some questions. And, in the last 2 summers, we have run our program virtually, and our summer interns told us that there aren't so many, interactions with people that you can have randomly, right? So basically, you have to make an extra effort to reach out to people and connect with them and to network and ask questions, right? So that's a little different when you are sort of starting in. But it hasn't really changed, and all the good advice that Joanna has given is absolutely on spot, like about being prepared, about thinking through your stories and examples, right? All of that is still very important.
Wonderful, thank you. Sandra, do you think that there's something maybe specifically in the interview part of the process that has changed, or even maybe when the job is actually, I'll save that for Tiia since she just kind of started in the time, but I guess in the interview process, like, is it harder to stand out given the context of COVID, or again, is it, it sounds like from Michaela's perspective, things are, as much as they change to this kind of virtual format that we have right now, all also are the same in a lot of ways. So what has been your perspective there?
Yes, I think from an interview perspective, we continue using our same methodology, that is competency-based interviews. So I don't think that there is any change there. But when I was like listening to Michaela, I said at the end, one advice that I think will be important is even if you go in a virtual interview, be present there. So it's like prepare your space, your time and everything, because it's just like 30 minutes, 40 minutes that you're gonna be able to be there. So like you have like a good time with the other person, and you have time to reflect, and an environment that allow you to do that. I think that's my only recommendation, because sometimes people decide, I don't know, I'm driving, so I'm gonna take the interview. Maybe it's not the right timing to do it. So I think think about it, because even if it's virtual, well, it's your time for the interview. So I think that's the only thing that I believe to consider.
Great, thank you. And then Tiia, I want to get your perspective, because you have started, I mean, obviously you've been with the company, but you have started a new position within this context of COVID and all that it's created. So Have you noticed any big differences in like the, actually starting a new job position, or your kind of onboarding periods, so to speak, and that, going back to the conversation we were having in the first panel, that first 90 days, it's so important to leave a good first impression. And, if you can just speak to how that's changed, or how you've, adapted in addressing that first 90 days in a new job in this more virtual context.
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of us, as you're going through a period of change now, kind of in this virtual world, it's just more awkward, right? And you have to realize that and kind of lean into it and be more intentional, right? So you're right, you're not going to have so much of that water cooler or like lunchtime chat. So you really, it means that you have to really kind of try harder, right? So could be that in my case, I was just starting my job, and I made sure HR supported me, and I had like a new leader session with my team to kind of introduce more about myself that maybe they weren't comfortable to ask me over like a formal, Zoom chat or something. And also to share more about my thinking, and to kind of open the conversation so that they could also feel open with me. And also I try to schedule things like, virtual happy hours or things like that, where people do have the chance to kind of connect more as people than just thinking about the, the specific business need. But yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's the reality that we're all in together. And so it's kind of a connection point that that you can have, right, when you're in an interview, because everybody struggles with technology, or everybody struggles with figuring out where the buttons are when you're moving between Zoom and the 3 or 4 different technologies that are out there for meetings. But I definitely encourage the same feedback as what Sandra said. It's really important during that time to really control your environment, right? If your dog is barking, or your brother or sister is coming in and out of the room, that takes away from your confidence and your focus on your objective, which is the company hiring you, right? So really try to control your environment, and also always have a backup plan, right? I loved that Tiffany in the prior session, she had her backup plan, how she was going to connect. When I have an important call, I always have my phone nearby in case my connection drops out in the house. I have headphones in case my speaker drops out. Like, you always need that plan A, B, and C, and check that technology before you have that meeting or that interview, because that really can be so distracting. And then it takes away from, you walked into that interview so pumped up and so full of confidence, and then can take you down a couple of points in terms of your state of mind if you're struggling with that technology when you get started.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think it's so important, because, even though we are moving out of a lot of, differences that COVID brought in 2020, I think there are still, some aspects that are here to stay, or at least in the, interim here to stay. And so it's great to hear, your perspective and advice you have for a group of women who are likely entering somewhat, a workforce that is somewhat impacted by COVID. And, I think those are some great tips, especially as I have a dog that barks all the time. So that's, definitely something that I've had to deal with and navigate. And so, it's wonderful to hear your advice on that. Before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about investing in your professional networks. I think, networking is something we talk about constantly. And, I think it's always existed, but I think it's become more prevalent, more talked about, certainly in the last 10 years. And so I'm curious as to any advice you have for someone, again, just starting out, on how you even really begin to grow your network. I think that's can be a really tough position to be in when you either don't have any familial connections or friends of a friend, whatever that might be. But when you really are just, you're starting out at a new job and you want to work on growing your professional network, what that looks like. So Michaela, do you have any specific advice you want to share as it relates to networking?
Yes, I had to learn this the hard way, because I'm introverted by nature, right? And so like reaching out to new people doesn't come so easily. So the way that I started was that, I'd always pay attention to all the people that I was meeting as part of anything that I was doing, like school or my first jobs, right? And then staying in touch with those people, right? So really I had to like remind myself, okay, I know these people already and I'm just gonna connect with them from time to time, right? Because, when I was about 10 years into my career, I was part of a program where they asked us like, do you know 10 people that could help you with, if you needed help now, inside your company and outside your company and in your family personal circle? And I said, okay, family personal circle, good, right? Inside a company, good, but outside, really not so good, right? So then I continued to push myself. And what helped me is one of my strengths is curiosity, right? So know your strengths. Remember, Joanna talked about that. I try to, if I'm sort of like nervous about meeting someone new, I try to activate my curiosity and say, okay, what do I want to learn about this person? Who are they? And then it puts me at ease and makes it easy to interact.
Wonderful, thank you. Sandra, any advice for our students just beginning their networking skills or creating their networks rather?
I would say that I'm not introvert, but I think that when I moved for the first time to the US and people start saying, oh, you need to start doing your one-on-ones, like even for me, it was like an uncomfortable moment. It's like reaching out people and say, hey, I would like to meet with you because I need to sound interesting, what I'm gonna talk about. But I think what at least I found at Colgate is people were really open to that. So when I start doing and I start reaching out, I realized that people were really open to. And obviously, as everything, you need to be prepared for the conversation. So it's like, think about what you would like to talk, what are the kind of questions that you would like to ask, because obviously people are investing time. So it's like, you will need to be also, because it's like a win-win relationship at the end. So I think it's an uncomfortable moment when you start doing it, but then when you get used, become more natural. And I think my recommendation is just to be prepared for the session, and you're gonna see that people gonna be open to.
Thank you so much. So as they always say, practice makes perfect. So I think that's a good point. Just kind of jumping in and working at it is one of the hardest parts, maybe. Tiia, before we shoot off, anything you'd like to add to the networking tips?
Sure. So 3 quick things. One is that I think everybody thinks that they're not good enough at networking. So just know that you have that in common with everybody else. I think everyone would raise their hand and say, I could be better at networking, right? So know that everybody is on their journey there, okay? The second one is if it gets awkward and you're like, oh God, I don't know, I really want to talk to that person, but I don't know what to talk to them about. I think Michaela makes a great point. Just ask questions because people love to talk about themselves. So if you can just figure out a good question, a couple of questions to ask someone, you can start that conversation and it's going to go from there. Okay. Then the third thing, I think this was really interesting that I learned recently that someone mentioned to me that networking is about also thinking about what you're bringing to the conversation, what you can offer, what help you could offer, what insight you could offer, right? And you may think, okay, I'm just graduating college and I have nothing to offer when I'm going to go talk to some high person in an organization. But actually, your perspective is really important. I recently had a one-on-one with a Colgate intern that reached out to me. And I was dying to know, like, okay, what's going on? What is going on in the minds of your friends? What's important to you when you think about a company that you're looking for? What are the issues that you're struggling with today? How are you doing in your internship in COVID times? How's that working now? Like all of those things and those insights that he was able to bring to me. So you actually have a lot more to offer than you think. So you should enter into those networking conversations with confidence.
Thank you so much. That's really, truly great advice. And I can't thank you all enough for joining us today. Speaking a little bit about networking, we do have a program called MentorHER, and that's a wonderful way for you and our audience to begin your networking if you haven't already, or to work on your networking skills, as Sandra advised. So we're going to be sending out that link in our chat, but you can sign up to be a mentee, and we have wonderful Colgate mentors who participate in this program. I think some of the panelists you saw or heard from today actually have served as mentors. So I encourage all of you to kind of take some of this advice and start practicing on your networks. And our MentorHER program is a wonderful way that you can begin to do so. Again, that link is sent out in our chat, and you can sign up on the website. We'll match you with a mentor that matches your background or your career goals, things like that. And it's a wonderful experience. It's 60 minutes, one-time commitment, so really easy. But again, just practicing at growing these networks and working on your general networking skills. So I want to thank Sandra, Tiia, and Michaela again for joining us today. This was such wonderful advice. I feel like I always walk away. I've done this now for a second year in a row, and I feel like each time I walk away with more advice that I myself want to take and use in my own professional trajectory. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your days and really leaving us with some wonderful advice.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes, our
Thank you
pleasure.
for the invitation. Bye.
Thank you all, and have
All the
the rest
best.
of your day.